The Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Well, hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview programme, taking a look at tomorrow's games in the Borders and also focusing on a very important study on MND, which will be of great interest to anyone who plays rugby. Well, I'm Stuart Cameron, with me is Dale Clancy, and there's no doubt things are beginning to warm up in Clubland. We're approaching the 6th week of the Premiership and 5 weeks in the National League, and already we're getting a feel for who may be challenging for the top spots and who might be finding the going tough over the coming weeks. But let's begin tonight with National 2 for a change, because we're covering a very historic game tomorrow on Borders Rugby Radio with live commentary of the match between Berwick and Peebles. Now, just to recap, the two haven't played each other for 12 years competitively. For the first time in a long time, Peebles' ranking in the Borders of 7th place could be under threat. Now, Berwick have enjoyed quick promotions from the East Leagues to Division 2, and they're now in the same league as Peebles. And some interesting subplots here are that Berwick are unbeaten at home since 2017, while the last time the two met in 2010, it was a Border League game, and in fact, Dale Clancy was playing in that match, 84-0, but it was to Peebles.
Yeah, I think...
And you don't really remember it, do you?
No, I think the one thing I do remember is I remember an incident with Nathan Trotter stepping off his foot, and our scrum half at the time, Rhys Hammer, going in with a big tackle, and I think the fall of Nathan kind of met Rhys Hammer's shoulder, and I remember it being an injury. I also remember not scoring.
Yes, out of 84 points, that's shocking.
Yeah, I wasn't
it?
that prolific a try scorer, to be fair, but I think at the time where Peebles, when I was playing for Peebles, Berwick and Peebles were almost ships in the night. We kind of passed each other, and never, as history shows, we've not really been in the same venue for a while in terms of the arena of Scottish rugby, but now we are, and I think it's good to see. But in National 2, if I'm being honest and having an honest assessment of it, I think at the moment this is probably the top that Berwick can reach with their cohort, and I think this is the lowest that Peebles can go with their cohort. I feel that Peebles they're just still that sleeping giant. They've got such a good nucleus of players, but they've got the likes of Greg Rayburn out, who's out for the foreseeable, if not forever. But they've got really quality players. They've had quality players over the last few years. They've got Callum Anderson, Scott McCormick, Davy Payton, Ryan McConnell. A lot of players that have played and represented Scotland in some era. So, Berwick have had Andrew Skeen. And obviously Youngie as
Gary
well.
Holborn,
and Gary Holborn.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of players. But the thing with these two teams is because they play in the area they are, the players attract, are very attractive to other clubs, so they do go away. So it is hard to build that momentum. I do feel Peebles are building something with the likes of the under-16s and the Colts going well. Hopefully that continues over the next few years. But it's difficult from Peebles because we're all really intelligent and we go to university, so it's hard to try and retain them. But I think it's an intriguing fixture on paper. Berwick haven't been beaten for, 2017?
At home?
Yeah, at home. So they've not been beaten at home. I had a lot of good games against Berwick in terms of we would beat them all the time. But it's different now. We're a decade removed, and both teams are in the same league for exactly the same reasons, because that's their level. So Peebles will go down. They had a good result against Newton Stewart after getting an absolute howking off of Preston Lodge, but they'll go down, with confidence, I think. And Berwick are still finding their feet, but at home they're a very, very difficult opponent to play over the last few years.
So how do we explain Berwick's rise? Because of the last 5 years, we saw them do tremendously well. They were in the regional leagues. They won the Shield, of course, at the National Stadium at Murrayfield. Then, of course, COVID came, but they got back-to-back promotions to National 3 and now into National 2. So it's a tremendous achievement. And as you say, a lot of their best players have been snapped up by the bigger clubs.
Berwick have put a lot of work into their youth section, trying to make their club a community club again, and I think it's reaping its benefits now. They're getting a lot of players back in coaching. They're getting, they're able to retain they're more effective players as well, and that is part of where rugby is now. I think with Super 6, with the Premiership, it's a little bit different in terms of the top level of rugby player. I think the importance of work and your community is a little bit is a little bit more important than what it used to be, just to be paid 150 quid a week in a brown envelope from a club. It's different now. People want to just play it and enjoy it and mostly play with their mates. So I think that's part and parcel of why Berwick have started to come back up. They've managed to stabilise the club.
Well, let's hear from both camps, and we'll hear from Ian Chisholm very, very shortly. But first of all, the head coach of Berwick, who is, of course, Colin Young.
It's the first time we've really had a competitive border derby for, I think, about 12 years. So, and I think the last time it was against Peoples. We are very much close to unchanged, apart from Nathan Melrose, who's away to a wedding this weekend, who's went back-to-back wins over Falkirk and the narrow 1 point win over last weekend. Hopefully the weather is nice and settled, where both teams can play a bit of rugby. No doubt Peoples will come down with a strong challenge, but hopefully we can hold them out and get the result.
And Ian Chisholm is certainly looking forward to the match. Here's his thoughts.
We've had a good opportunity to have a look at last weekend's game against Newton Stewart, and while I think it was a really positive performance for us, it highlighted a few grey areas for us, particularly around our attack. So we've used this week to make a few adjustments and maybe make things a wee bit more simple and easy to understand in the way that we want to attack. We need to see a real improvement in our accuracy and understanding of how we want to play the game, and we need to start turning visits into the opposition's 22 into points. We're getting there way too often, and we're coming away without. A lot of that's through giving away easy penalties or just coughing up possession. Look, there were times at the weekend where we looked lost, and we did get away with it because we played at quite a high tempo and we had quite a bit of flow in our attack. For me, I'm not overly happy with the style of rugby that we're playing. I understand that it'll take time for the players to get the way that I want to play and train. At some point, it'll become automatic to the players, but results are important. And for us to keep a wee bit of momentum, I've probably got to compromise with how I want us to play in the short term to give us an opportunity to develop the game I'm looking for in the long term. This weekend, we're well aware that Berwick are a good side on the rise. They've not been beaten since 2017. Peoples don't get very many border derbies these days, especially ones within our league. So we're really looking forward to jumping over the border. Squad-wise, Andrew Brown, he was excellent last week. He's 39 going on 19. He drops out of the squad. Him and his partner are due a baby. And Berwick's just a wee bit too far, just in case something does happen. Roddy Guinea, he had 18 carries last weekend, which is a massive number. He's unavailable this weekend, so youngster Finlay Sinclair is going to move to 8, and Ewan Jackson, he rotates back off work. He moves into the starting squad. Club captain Neil Hogarth, he came off just before half-time last week, nursing a wee bit of a hamstring injury, and if he's okay to play, we'll name him on the bench. I'm delighted to have Rowan McKeever back. He is available, rotating back through work, and look, Rowan's a quality player, and what he lacks in size he makes up with sheer mongrel. He's a quality defender, and he's absolutely tireless around the pitch as well. And he's also a real source of quick ball for us. When he clears a ruck, he's really aggressive, and he understands that we're trying to finish the ruck before it even starts. Willie Aitken and John Gray, they moved from the bench into the starting side, with John Napier coming into the squad as well after a decent showing for the Reds. And look, our starting backline remains the same with Murdo Anderson. He covered out anywhere from second row all the way back to fullback. But our squad for the weekend coming is Willie Aitken, Andy Muir, John Gray in the front row, Cammy Pye and Russ Brown in the second row, Ewan Jackson, Finlay Collins and Finlay Sinclair in the back row, DC and myself in the halfbacks, Rob Harrison and Jack Harrison in the centre, James Dow, Frey McKeever and Donald Anderson make up the back three, and on the bench we have John Napier, Neil Hogarth, Rowan McKeever and Murdo Anderson. Looking forward to jumping down to Scremiston this weekend. We're hoping the weather keeps, but look, like I said, we've made adjustments to our attack and how we're going to try and play the game, and I think it's going to be more effective for the type of game that we're going to be playing at the weekend.
Does that man ever come up for breath?
I know.
That was pretty impressive. 3 minutes and 15 seconds non-stop, but fantastic insight from Ian, you always get. Yeah,
and I think the good thing that I can hear from him there is something different from the other weeks. I think he's really positive and enjoying his time at Peebles, but you can start to see his level of expectation starting to come in there, what he wants from the Peebles players, which, is something that is sometimes a carrot and stick thing. Sometimes you need a carrot, a bit of an incentive, some polite, words in their ears. Sometimes you just need battered with a stick, and I think that's starting to come in from Chisholm there.
History, of course, says a Peebles win, but there is that home record going back a long, long time, 2017. I know, there was a year and a half out with COVID. Even still, that's a big, big record that they want to hang on to.
Yeah, it gives Berwick incentives. There's loads in it. It's a border derby. I don't think you can rely on results from a decade ago, or even the pre-season fixture that was a couple of years ago. There's nothing that you can take from that. This is a completely different cohort of players for both squads. Apart from Willie, Donald and Neil in the Peebles ranks, Neil Hogarth, there won't be anybody in that team that will have played Berwick in a competitive fixture. This is two teams going together that are very unfamiliar with each other. So form and history, I don't think really matters. I think that home advantage, that 2017 unbeaten record, is going to be the big thing that Berwick will grasp onto, and Peebles will be looking for a border win and really put a marker down in this league to go towards the top and try and be competitive.
Prediction?
My honest prediction is a narrow Peebles win, but I know they don't travel that well, and I think that the occasion might really galvanise Berwick. Their results show that they've been competitive, and they've been running teams close. Their team has got a lot of really good players in it. It's too difficult to call. My head and my heart probably says a narrow Peebles victory, but it's going to be really difficult.
And I'm going to go for a narrow Berwick victory,
right.
So it'll end up being a draw,
hopefully.
Clearly. Well, it's a really intriguing fixture, and one that we'll be covering live tomorrow on Borders Rugby Radio, direct from Scremerston, with Stuart McFarlane and Robin Purdy, and also Mickey Yanotta, our Berwick correspondent, will be there, and it should be a cracking encounter. Well, let's turn our attention to other events tomorrow, including Super 6 and Southern Knights are away to Heriots at Golden Acre, currently down at the bottom of the table. Here's head coach Bruce Ruthven.
Looking forward to going up to Heriots. We know it'll be another tough challenge for us, but something the guys are really looking forward to. We've competed really well against the Ayrshire Bulls and Watsonians the last 2 weeks away from home, and the guys fronted up and shown a really great attitude. Pro players Jacob van der Waal in the Kortrijk, coming from Edinburgh Rugby, in at number 1 and number 10. Robbie Deans starts, gets his first start for the Knights, coming in as a tight head prop, with Isaac Brake moving to the bench. Harris Rutherford will get his second appearance for the Knights off the bench. Paddy Anderson returns to the bench after an injury spell. But apart from that, we're pretty settled with the rest of our squad.
So 5 o'clock kickoff at Golden Acre, and it's been a difficult season for the Knights so far. Can they turn things round?
No, I don't think so. I've been quite impressed with Heriots in waves and fits. They've got a big burly pack. They've got ex-Southern Knights wingers and backs in there that can unlock the defences. So I think Heriots are a class above. The introduction of Van der Walt's an interesting one for the Knights, because that's been a big weak link of theirs. I think losing Baggett has been huge for them. I think it's only really been realised how much of an important linchpin he was for the Southern Knights, because Cam Scott, I'm a fan of. I think he's a good player. I like the way his passing range is really good. He's inventive as well with the boot. But Van der Walt's obviously a professional coming back and going to lend his experience. The Knights have had a horrible time, and I think it's been made even worse by the Wolves win against the Bears on Friday night last week. It's making it really, really difficult, and I think it's just a matter of now preparing for next year, because they're not going to be in the top 4. They're not going to be competing for those places. So it's almost like the gloves are off. They can just throw caution into the wind, because Herriot still have something to play for. They're still looking to try and get maybe into that third place, so they can play the runner up in the regular championship before the playoffs and whatnot. So the Southern Knights, there's no pressure on them, but it has been a campaign with not a lot of positives. There's some, but there's not been a lot.
One game after this, home to Stirling on the 15th before the playoffs, which they won't be involved in. Currently it's Ayrshire Bulls on 36, Watsonians 34. Then a huge gap to Boroughmuir Bears on 22, Heriots with 16, and then another huge gap to the Knights and Stirling Wolves just on 5 points. These are big gaps though, aren't they?
Yeah, they're huge gaps, but the gaps have come because of something, and I think the Southern Knights one is the mass exodus of all the players that left. That's been triggered by something which has left huge holes in what was a successful setup up until that point. It's just not been a promising campaign for the Knights. The one thing that is promising that I really must stress and highlight, Aidan Cross and Sam Derrick
absolutely is
in that team. I think last year we were covering it in National 1, and when I've ever been watching the coverage or been involved in it, they've not looked out of place at all. The introduction of Ben Pickles has came in. He's maybe not really been lucky with injury and whatnot. Kieran Clark has maybe not really pushed on as well. But Aidan Cross, he's been scoring a lot of tries, and Sam Derrick has been carrying a lot of ball. He's looked a find for the Southern Knights. and which is good. Losing players like Moody and whatnot, you needed somebody who's going to just, truck it up, take the ball forward. They'd have been able to recruit around about that, but Sam Derrick and Aidan Cross certainly need a mention in terms of their efforts this season.
Of course, it was interesting looking at the social media as well, and it was very much 50-50 regarding Stirling Wolves and Duncan Weir being drafted in. A lot of people hated that, and they said, well, that's not what Super 6 is about. And others said, well, this is great because the youngsters can learn from the experience of Duncan Weir.
I was at the game. I got asked pretty much the same question, and on one wing you had Kerr Johnson, young 17-year-old from Gala, making his debut for Birmingham. I'm sure it was his full starting debut. Now, what other test are you going to... He was against Walter Fafita. He was getting kicked down the throat of Duncan Weir. Now, that's great for him. Just because Duncan Weir's coming back and playing at that level, he contributed well. You could see he was a very good player, but he contributed to what was a really good game. People goes, it's meant to be a pathway for young players. Now, if you've got a path that leads to your house, I'm pretty sure you don't go up the pathway into your house and never leave again. You has to work both ways. You have to go back down, and that's where this little melting pot of players in the Super 6 works for me. I am a fan of it. I like the level of rugby. I like how it's got professional aspects, but it's got the rawness of amateur players there, and that's what excites me, because they're high scoring, they're high energy, they're physical, but they're also, there's a lot of innovative play. It contributed from players like Duncan Weir, but also the rawness of somebody like Kerr Johnson. It's brilliant to see.
Well, let's concentrate on the Premiership now. All three Borders teams are at home. We'll have a camera at Mansfield Park for Hawick's game against Mar. Hawick, the only unbeaten team in the table and yet in fourth position, while Mar are sixth. Long home record to defend for the Greens, and the Bill McLaren Shield once again up for grabs. Here's Hawick head coach Matty Douglas.
I think it's one on Saturday that we're really looking forward to. There's been a good buzz at training this week after a good win last Saturday up at GHA. I think week to week we're getting better, and we can see that as a coaching team, and the players can see that as well, starting to buy into what we're trying to bring in. And from the Selkirk game to now we're really progressing, so we know how hard this is going to be. Mar are Premiership champions. They've won at some tough places and maybe haven't had the greatest starts to the season, but they had a big win against Curry on Saturday, so they'll be full of confidence. I know Craig will have them ready to go, so for our front we just need to get our game plan right, and they're coming to Mansfield, so we need to be ready and match that, and try and play to our strengths. So it's one that as a club and as a coaching team we're looking forward to, and see where we're at as a squad. Team selection wise, forward pack stays the same for last weekend. Logan Gordon-Woolley comes onto the wing for Finn Douglas, who is unavailable. On the bench, Stuart and Ross Graham are both unavailable, so in comes Rory McLeod after a few games with the force. He's really stood out, so great to see him back in the fold, and Lewis Ferguson comes onto the bench as well. So on the whole, it's a very strong squad and consistent this week. So as I said, as a coaching team, we're excited to see where we're at as a squad this week.
Well, that Mar result, beating Curry last week, will have certainly injected some fire into the Mar side, but they've lost twice this season already.
Yeah, and I think, after the conversation about the Super 6 League and talking about, how distant it is, you go into the amateur level and it is a lot tighter, and I think that, if you've got an appetite for tight, close leagues, then the Premiership is almost like what last season's Nat 1's like. The Mar upset and Curry essentially is an upset. Mar are the reigning Premiership champions, and they defeated Curry last year, so in terms of we're only a few months removed, it's not much of an upset, but Mar have struggled to hit the ground running this year. Curry have looked good, but they've conceded points. Hawick are undefeated, but as you say, they're in fourth, and Edinburgh Accies have been putting in some results as well. You can't discount Glasgow Hawks as well. They've absolutely houked Musselburgh last week, so it's another big congested league table. National one is equally as congested, but those teams, and sorry, but I've completely disregarded Selkirk, who have surprised me this season as well, getting a good win on the road against a Blues in a game that they probably could have and maybe should have lost. They were able to claw it back and win that game after a narrow defeat against Edinburgh Accies, the week removed from that. So every team I feel can beat every other team in this league, home and away. And perhaps to the argument, Jed as well. I think Jed are good at home, but maybe not as good on the road. But they can, it's an interesting league. And this game in the Premiership, the Hawick playing Mar, is an absolute cracker for anybody who wants to just see blood and guts on a rugby field. I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant.
Now, it's interesting, of course, talking of Curry, and particularly as we do the updates during our live commentaries as well. Curry were way down to Musselburgh and way down to GHA, but they've managed to come back and win those games. But just to see them in that position early on where they're not kind of getting out of the blocks is very intriguing.
Yeah, I think it's good to see them vulnerable because last year they were almost like impregnable. You couldn't score any points against them. Haig managed to beat them in the opening game of the season at Mansfield Park. I think it was at home, and from there they then went undefeated. And they went undefeated all the way until the Premiership final when they got beat by Mar at Millennium. It's good to see that they've got that vulnerability now. Obviously, I think Fergus Scott, their captain for many a year, he's retired, and he's obviously going to be a big loss. And they're maybe going through a little bit of a change in terms of personnel because they have lost players to Super 6. But, a team like Curry, if they want to be the top dogs in the Premiership and they want to be like what Ayr were and like what Heriots and Melrose have been for the last few years, you need to go through these transitional periods. You need to breathe through these players. You need to provide that, that platform for really quality players to play for your club and represent and compete at the top level. And this is a top level amateur rugby. And Curry this year at least look a little bit vulnerable. That all teams, I think, look a little bit vulnerable.
Well, Selkirk, they're hosting GHA. Now, they were beaten by Hawick last week at Bradham. Selkirk edged past Heriots Blues at Golden Acre. So how does head coach Scott White approach this one?
Got a wee bit out of jail last week at Golden Acre. We gave them 2 penalties. Now, they had a shot at goal to win the game 18-17. Thankfully, we managed to hold on and win 17-15, and something that we didn't do a lot of last year, win on the road. So, to get 4 points up at Golden Acre is a huge plus for us. And now focus has changed to Philip Hawke this week, to where we play GHA. There's a few guys away on October holidays this week, so the squad will be a wider squad effort. We've got Josh Welsh, Henry Clarkson away on holiday, Matt Reid still unavailable, and then in the forward pack we've got Andrew Cochrane away on holiday and Scott McClelmont away at Tupsdale. So jiggling about in terms of positions and people potentially playing out of position at the weekend, but at the end of the day it's about putting a squad out on the pitch that hopefully we can get some points against GHA. The biggest focus for us is this week come with a newfound energy. I think the last couple of weeks we've kind of been off the pace, and we're still looking for that consistent 80-minute performance, and we've not managed to do that this season. So that's been at the forefront of training this week. We had a look at ourselves on Tuesday night, and training's been really positive this week, and there's been a real good reaction. So look, I'm really looking forward to Saturday. It's a really crucial week for us, with teams around us in the league playing each other. So it's a great opportunity for us to get closer to the top of the table. And then you've got to look at, then we've got Mar away and Curry at home the next again 2 weeks, so that's obviously going to be tough. So look, it's a really important week for us, but one the whole squad's really looking forward to is getting into GHA.
Well, while Selkirk played well enough to get the points against Embrackis when they lost out, perhaps things evened themselves out a little bit for Selkirk, winning late at Golden Acre last week.
Yeah, I think I think Scott White has hit the nail on the head there. He said that they've won a game that last season they probably wouldn't have, and I perhaps took that into my analysis before the start of the season, from their form from last year, and it's nice to see them turn it around, because that's a game that they would have lost last year that they're being able to win. The Embrackis one, I think that they're difficult at home. Selkirk, they have always been really difficult at home. So they're going into this weekend, although they're missing a few players, you would imagine that they're going to be strong enough to be able to put away GHA, because it's a couple of big weeks coming with Mar and Curry. Mar away, it's such a difficult atmosphere. It's very intense up there. But Curry at home, you would fancy Selkirk to think that if they can keep the squad nice and fresh, they've got a lot of quality players. When you look at their squad now, on paper, even with the missing players this week, their squad is strong. And if you go into a game against Curry, that they've, Musselburgh were able to put a lot of points past them and get them in a really vulnerable position. Selkirk would equally be able to do that. But this next 3 weeks could be a big say and have a big say in where Selkirk are going to be playing the rugby for the rest of the season in terms of what their targets are. If they can get 2 wins out of 3, they're going to be looking up the way. If they only get 1 win out of 3, they perhaps could be looking at mid-table and thinking, right, we might be out the the picture here for the playoffs. But it's going to be a big October for Selkirk.
Certainly, if they play that 80-minute rugby game, which Scott is craving from his squad, then I think they'll just be a little bit too good for GHA. But as we saw, GHA went to Curry and scored 40 points, so you just never know. The other Premiership game, of course, involving a border side is at Riverside Park with Jed Forest at home to Heriot's Blues. Jed head coach is Andrew Brown.
Our last game out was disappointing given the effort to come away with nothing. To be dominant up front again and hold Accies to 14 all at half time, the game was ours to be taken. But we know how difficult it is on the road. Usually it's Jed that are stronger in the second half, but I feel Accies came out a totally different team, a bit like they did the week before against Selkirk. This week we'll be looking to put right the wrongs from last week, as it's a must-win game for us this week, and to try and make Riverside the fortress that we want it to be. Be looking for better control and trust in the game plan and the systems in place. Have a few changes this week, which is unfortunate. It'd be good to get some continuity and get the same team out each week, which is proven to be challenging. But out of the pack, Gregor Law, Gary Young, Blake Roth and John Story are all unavailable, but in comes Ben McNeil, who's really dynamic, and Matthew Atkinson adds the bulk, along with Jamie Hind, who again is a big strong guy. So unfortunately, just missing from the backs is Lewis Walker, but Gregor and Lewis Young are both available, which only adds to the experience. Again, we'll be looking to capitalise this week on the fact that it is a home game. Any team travelling's already at a disadvantage, a 20-30% disadvantage. So hopefully we'll come out stronger this week and take the game to Heriot and get the victory.
Andrew Brown, and what are your thoughts on that one? Shame to see Lewis Walker out, because it's always good when Lewis gets together with the other Lewis Young and Gregor.
Yeah, I think just having the Youngs back, good. Obviously they've been in and out the squad so far this season for reasons unbeknown to me, but I think that they're at that stage where they're still able to contribute, which I think is great for Jed, because they are really important players. Lewis Walker is a really, really good player. I think when I watched him at the Sevens, I said I think a couple of weeks ago how I was liking the thought of him playing 13 and playing into fullback as well. Coming into the line, and he's a playmaker, but he's got a good bit of pace about him. So obviously he's going to be a miss this week. But it's one of those games that you welcome the Youngs back, and not just to put it on them. The loss of Gregor Law is a big one as well, but they've got a big pack. They've got a bit of form as well going into this. Yes, they've not won a lot of games, but they've been scoring tries. I think they've been doing a lot better than perhaps I maybe gave them credit for. Heriot's like to chuck the ball about. They like to play a bit of rugby. They've got a big pack as well. So I think it's going to be a bit of a shootout between the two teams. But again, Riverside Park is a hard place to go, and Jed love playing at home. Got to win your home games if you want to try and go up the table.
Well, I mentioned the Super 6 table. What about the Premiership? We've got Curry 21, Edinburgh Accies 21, Glasgow Hawks 21, Hawick 20, Selkirk 16, Mar 15, and then it dips. GHA 7, Jed 7, Musselburgh 3 and Heriot's Blues 2.
We've not got a real context of the league, but last season in the Premiership, I think we had 2 games to go and we still didn't know who was going to be finishing in the top 4, which is exactly what you want. And it's nice to see them all fighting out at the top. I think the teams that are there are the teams that you would have thought would have been there at the start. At the moment, I could not pick a Premiership champion.
Well, after the break, a chat with Jessica Lee from the My Name's Doddie Foundation about the new study into MND, which was published this week.
Based in Galashiels but covering the whole region and beyond, Borders Mortgage Hub is your one-stop shop for all things mortgage related in the Borders. Visit us at bordersmortgagehub.com or call us on 01896 807 008. That's 01896 807 008. Borders Mortgage Hub. Mortgages for the Borders in the Borders.
Hi, Nicky Walker here, Curriculum Learning Manager for Sports and Outdoor Activities at Borders College. Have you ever considered turning your passion for sport into a rewarding career? If so, then why not get in touch at borderscollege.ac.uk/sport.
Borders College, regionally focused, globally engaged.
This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
A new study by Professor William Stewart has been published, and it calls for more research into examining links between sport and neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, Parkinson's disease and MND, as well as pleading with government bodies to have less rugby at higher level and less contact during training. Well, joining me to discuss this is Jessica Lee, the Research Director of the My Name'5 Doddie Foundation. Well, Jessica, thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. This new study is a concern because it implies rugby players are at greater risk than in other sports. What's the Foundation's take on its findings?
So I guess first of all, we really welcome studies like this. It's absolutely critical to help build our understanding of the causes of motor neuron disease, of understanding of the disease biology, and ultimately studies like this could help pave way for future treatments. Clearly this news will be worrying to both the rugby and the motor neuron disease community, and as a foundation we want to make sure that the results are viewed with caution, because it's clear that further research is needed before we can draw any meaningful conclusions about the link between professional rugby and motor neuron disease and what that means for the sport.
Dr. James Robson has been involved in Scottish rugby and British and Irish Lions rugby for many years, well respected of course, but while he welcomes the report, I get the impression from his quote that he feels that the study was based on a relatively small number of people, and because of that the results may not be too accurate.
Exactly. So motor neuron disease is not a very common disease, and in this study they looked at the electronic health records of 412 former Scottish rugby players and a matched sample of the general population, which included just over 1,200 people. And for an uncommon disease like motor neuron disease, this is a very small sample size. So even the researchers themselves have noted that there were very few cases of motor neuron disease in their sample, which means that the margin of error for their estimates is very high. So really what we need to do now is take these findings and replicate them in larger scale studies to get a true estimate of the potential increased risk of motor neuron disease in rugby players.
His message, of course, is that the benefits of playing rugby far outweigh the risks, which is true, but how serious should parents take this when considering whether their child takes part in rugby?
So I guess one thing to say is that this study has been conducted on elite rugby players, so people that play rugby very often and at a very high level. So we can't assume that this phenomenon would apply to people who play rugby recreationally. So our advice is that people do not need to make any changes to playing the sport recreationally.
As you say, it's at the pro end where risks are higher, but Professor William Stewart is saying that we must act now and cut back on elite rugby rather than add more and more competitions, which of course is what World Rugby is doing.
I guess that there's a few additional things to consider before we go to that point. I guess one of them is that although this study has shown that there's a correlation between former Scottish rugby players and the development of motor neuron disease, it hasn't shown that playing rugby actually causes motor neuron disease. And we still don't really understand what does cause motor neuron disease. So it could be, for reasons that we don't yet understand, that people who are more predisposed to developing motor neuron disease are more attracted to elite level sport, including rugby. So there's no way at the moment that we can show that kind of causative effect between the two. So I guess that's definitely one thing to say. And the other thing is that in this study, they didn't look at head trauma. So there's no way to show that increased head trauma through, for example, rugby could lead to the development of motor neuron disease.
There seems to be a switch now, doesn't there, to not talk about concussion as much, but talk more about brain injuries instead, as people kind of tend to take more notice of that, I suppose.
I guess from our perspective, there's no real evidence linking brain concussion or brain injury to motor neuron disease at the moment. Further work is definitely needed in this area. The foundation is currently funding research looking at similar projects. So for example, we're funding a project that's looking at the potential link between strenuous physical activity and the development of motor neuron disease. So really we just need further work, further research to get some answers.
Well, Doddie's high-profile campaign has been really successful, other campaigns as well. But while organisations are honouring Doddie and supporting the cause, are they really reacting to the results of the research?
They do, and I think that the first step to doing that is in supporting these larger scale studies to really confirm the findings that have been shown in this paper in a small sample size. Until we know whether this replicates in bigger populations, I don't think there's any immediate actions we can really take at the moment.
So what should governing bodies be doing at the moment?
I guess what we need to do really is understand better what causes motor neuron disease, and in the meantime put in as many safeguarding procedures as we can within the game to the best of our knowledge.
Well, thanks very much indeed for joining me. That's Jessica Lee, the Research Director of the My Name'5 Doddie Foundation. Well, Dale, you've had a few head injuries in your time. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I remember finished playing rugby. I obviously retired for a knee injury, but I finished the tail end. I got concussed and knocked out a few times, and I think even then the protocol was a little bit different. But over the last few years, there has been a big change, and until Doddie made it in the public eye, I wasn't too aware of it. But then my wife's cousin's husband, ex-professional footballer, he's got MND. First time I met him was at his wedding, and I shook his hand at my wedding just a few months ago, and there's a stark difference, and it's horrible to see. And I think the thing that comes out of there is obviously there is more research that needs done. And the interesting thing there was, and not just rugby, when you think he's a football player, but when you think of football as well, what ends up happening is they're complete slaves to what they do for our public consumption. So we are absorbing it more and more. We're watching it on TV. People keep pumping more money in it, and with more games, it's more money. It's then there's more money probably going in making sports people play more without really knowing the full level of the risk that's there. And there's obviously there's some sort of link here. As much as the study could be slightly inaccurate, it's obviously highlighting that there's potentially could be a risk. Things have to change. Things transform over time, but obviously as the more research and the more money is put into this, the better understanding we will have, the better precautions will be put in place. And it's the good thing, the positive thing for there is it is elite. You watch an elite game of rugby, it is so bloody physical. Like, it is so intense in terms of the level of physicality that these players are exerting on each other.
I can feel the frustration of Professor William Stewart, who's obviously done and put a lot of time and effort into this particular research. And, immediately he went for the headlines, that something has to be done. We have to kind of cut down on training, contacted training. We have to not have more competitions. We need less competitions and all the rest of it. And so he's bringing this to the table, but then everyone is kind of saying, well, we need a bigger study before we can react to it. And I can sense the frustration that that's not what he wants to happen.
Probably the stark reality is that, and it was highlighted in that interview, is that it's not a common disease. Because it's not a common disease, how much finance does that quantify? And that's what's frustrating. So you need somebody to bang the drum. Doddie's been brilliant for it. Stephen Darby's been brilliant for it as well with the Darby Rimmer Foundation. Kevin Sinfield running for Rob Burrows. Ed Slater's doing a lot with Jim Hamilton. These are players that roll off they're in my head because of the work that they're doing with MND. And they're bringing it to the public, the public eyesight. They're aware of it now. But it's still that balancing act. How much money is contributed? I think it was it 50 million the government pledged in terms of research and investing in that. But I don't know, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that, a lot of that money's not been seen yet. So obviously we've been through COVID. It's the landscape has changed since that was probably announced. But, that's where it becomes difficult, because if it's not a common disease, and it's, I know somebody in the situation, and it's horrid to see, and he's brilliant, and as a person he's brilliant. Like, you don't cast him as having somebody with MND, but you have to then balance up. They quantify it as how much does this actually deserve, which is horrible, but that's just our society. That's the way that we operate. There's probably more money being put into Premiership football to watch it, to see people header balls and put themselves at more danger than actually going in to protect them. And that's really the cut and dry of it, is that it's entertainment and it makes money, and they want to, they want their pound of flesh, so they'll put these rugby players and these footballers out there to put themselves at risk of injury but they won't get the other side because there's not enough money to support the research.
Well, no apologies for spending quite some time on the programme on the subject of MND, and I'm sure there's an awful lot that we're going to be hearing over the coming months and years about that. Well, let's get back to matters in hand. National 1, and a very pleasant sight with Borders clubs in 1st, 2nd and 5th, meaning that currently there are 6 Borders teams in the top 15 of Scottish rugby.
Yeah, I think it's great. We've obviously, in National 1, in the Premiership, we've got a cluster of teams there, and I've been pretty vocal in terms of saying how exciting National 1 has been. The Kelso obviously picking up another great victory on the road last weekend when they played Stumel. It was a cakewalk in the first half. Made to work a little bit harder in the second half, but it probably highlights what National 1 is. It's great to see so many Border teams in there fighting for it as well, especially the 2 up the top.
Well, let's hear from Stuart Johnson first, head coach of Gala. They go to Biggar to try and do what Kelso did at Hartlepool a couple of weeks ago and come away with all 5 points.
Definitely be a tougher fixture than last weekend. Hartlepool's always a really tough place to go and get a result. But we were boosted by the return of Tim McCavanagh in the centre, Callum Pate at fullback, and Graham Dunn at number 8, with James Glendinning also coming back onto the bench. Russell Kerr continues at 10 after performing well last weekend, and young Gregor Collins gets his first start of the season on the wing. Well, apart from that, we're a very settled squad. So now we're going to Hartlepool mill full of confidence off the back of 4 bonus point wins, but we know that it'll not be easy, and Biggar will be hurting after 2 tough games the last 2 weeks against Highland and Kelso. Well,
you must fancy Gala, who are on a roll at the moment, and Biggar not really firing.
Hartlepool is a difficult place to go. I think it's a difficult fixture for Gala, but the form, the table, it does point towards a Gala victory. They've been very impressive, and there's not a lot of players in that team sheet that are household names in terms of really I think you look at Kelso and you've seen Andy Tate for a while, you've seen Bruce McNeil, Frankie Robson, spent a bit of time at Gala. These are players that you go, I really know them. But there's players that we'd seen like James Glendinning. He's obviously on the bench this weekend, but he was a player that I remember watching in the Shield final at the Dam Health last year, and I thought he was a tremendous player. He was, I think, playing hooker, had a lot of pace, a lot of power. He was like a wee dynamo, and they're the sort of players that are coming through. So when we went to Gala last year before their 7s, they were on about this one club mentality and going through in the same direction, and I think they've aligned very, very quickly, and it's so good to see because these players are now starting to make a name for themselves. You do see them really start to stand out, and they're starting to be etched on the minds of rugby spectators and rugby fans, especially in Gala, which is great to see.
Well, Kelso, they're at home to Highland this weekend, who are going well in 4th position at the moment. The last time they came to Pointer Park, though, they were beaten soundly of over 40 points. I don't think we'll see a repeat of that this time round, though. Here's Director of Rugby at Kelso, and that's Neil Hinnigan.
They're only 5 points behind us in the league, so they've got a bit of a target on their back. So, they'll be looking to close that gap or even lead progress in the league, so that's how big a game it is. Last week was a good win up at Stumel. We played well in patches, especially the first 20, but I think overall the players and the coaches and staff and everyone involved at Kelso were a little bit disappointed in the second half performance last week, and we've been disappointed in other aspects of our game at different points through the season so far, and we know we're not the finished article. We've got loads to work on, so at the moment we're just concentrating on working on the things that we are getting wrong and emphasising the things we're doing well and the positive side of that, and trying to build on the good stuff slowly and quietly, but obviously try to get better at the things we're not so good at. And one of those sort of things where if you rest on your laurels in this league, I think it could catch up with you, and there's 3 teams go down, so you've got to keep finding results and making sure you're at the right end of the table, and that's what we're looking to try and do. Team's quite settled this week. It's the same starting 15 as last week, which is great. On the bench, Morgan Thompson drops out, and so does Aaron Jackson. They both just to get more game time with the 2s. On an exciting note, Ashton Asante, who's only 18, he moved up from the Quins last year, tight-headed prop. He comes in for Morgan Thompson to get an opportunity, and he's been training and playing well for the 2s, so we have to give him that opportunity, and it's a real positive for the club to get a young prop like that into the mix and see what Ashton's got. So I know he'll be looking forward to it. And Mark Wilson returns from a trip last week. He was away and missed out, so he comes back in on the bench for Aaron Jackson.
So it'll be a big win if they can do that.
I know Neil Hinnigan's got a bad back, but he constantly seems to be looking down that table as opposed to up, which I find quite amusing because Kelso have been really good. They're sitting up in second position in the league. this is an opportunity to put a bit of daylight between them and Highland. But, from a squad point of view from Kelso, and obviously Neil was alongside me at the game in Inverleith last weekend, the mentality that they've got and the way that they're managing the squad is really interesting because, they're trying to get game time for players in the twos. They've got a good rotation. You see Ashton Asante coming in onto the bench, getting that rotation. I thought Morgan Thompson played quite well when he came on. So obviously they want to try and have that rotation, which is a complete luxury in amateur rugby because they've got players that they can rotate out. Aaron Jackson came on, he'll get game time in the twos. Mark Wilson comes back in. So obviously, they're in a very good position in terms of squad depth. Sometimes you don't have to have 15 world beaters in your starting lineup and 4 poor on the bench, and that can sometimes make you unstuck. They seem to have a great buy-in at the club at the moment.
Well, Melrose are beginning to find their straps after a stunning win by 64-11 over Aberdeen Grammar last Saturday. Remember, Aberdeen Grammar were a Premiership team this time last year, but they're 8 points adrift of Gala, 7 away from Kelso, so they'll need to start consistently winning games. Here's head coach Bert Grigg.
Obviously, we travel up to Dundee this week after a fairly comfortable home win versus Aberdeen last Saturday. Hopefully, get our first win away on the road this season, which we haven't managed to do yet. A relatively unchanged match day 20 with only James Brown changing, with Archie Pilcher in the starting team, the forward pack and the rest of the back line unchanged. Ben McLean comes in on the bench to provide that hooker cover after recovering from a dead leg, and we see the return of Harry Mikowski, who provides a bit more variety in our backs coverage on the bench. So yeah, looking forward to a good game up at Dundee. Obviously they off the back of a win away at Stirling, they'll have their dander up getting their first win of the season, so it's going to be a tough trip for our boys to pick up that win on the road. But yeah, prepped well this week and hoping to get the result come 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
So they're at Dundee, who lost at home to Gala but put 40 odd points on Stirling County last week on the road, the same Stirling that beat Melrose. So those results don't really make much sense, do they?
Yeah, I think that's probably where that little area of that league is. I think up the top it's going to be interesting. I think the likes of Ayr, Gala, Kelso, I'm surprised Biggar are not doing as well, but probably those 3 teams, it's going to be nip and tuck between them. And I think, the rest of them, Aberdeen Grammar look pretty poor, to be fair. Watsonians look like they're a little bit wobbly as well, but Melrose will want to keep building on that big victory against another city team, Aberdeen. It certainly shows the difficulty in terms of, in that Caledonia northern region of Scotland, how difficult it must be to sustain a club, because likes of Morgan FP, I think it was Morgan, they've folded, have they not? They're not a club any longer. Dundee have kind of amalgamated and rebranded, so it's difficult times up north, but Melrose will be hoping to try and take advantage of that.
Well, you're listening to Friday Rugby Preview, a bumper edition on Borders Rugby Radio for this week, and let's have a look at the East Leagues now. And in Division 1, Duns at home to Broughton, sitting at the bottom, unfortunately with -3 points at the moment. In Division 2, unbeaten Langham will play at home against Christophin. Now Langham are behind Livingston but have a game in hand, while Christophin are in 3rd place. Here's Langham skipper Nathan Smith.
Sees the end of a 3-game block at home, which we've won 2, along with that first game of the season away at Livingston. Another win there, so we're still unbeaten for the year. The buzz is really good. We're confident. We're chucking the ball about no matter what the weather. We seem to be really clicking in attack, and what was quite shaky at the start of the year, we seem to have sturdied up the defence, so we're looking really good going forward. Christophin, a team we've looked at and identified that they'll probably be the main challengers, along with Livingston as well. They're going really well, but them and Christophin, they're probably going to be the nearest challengers, we would say, come the end of the year when we're looking at the top of the table. But we're unbeaten and playing really well. We're coming off the pitch every week, still knowing that there's something more that we can give. So we're just excited. We really want that to click as well. Hopefully against a top team this weekend. But we're looking good. We want to keep that unbeaten run going, and we're confident we can do it.
That's Nathan Smith, captain of Langham they're going really well. Aspirations of promotion there.
I think that is great. They got that win on the road to open their campaign against Livingston, and it's great to hear that they're, Nathan Smith saying there about Christopher and Livingston are the challengers. So there's obviously a focus there. I think they'll be a bit disheartened about missing out so narrowly for promotion last year, and obviously they've got an axe to grind and they'll be wanting to go up. But it's those little buzzwords that you hear from club captains going, there's a good buzz about the place. They've obviously got a good culture, good buy-in. They're looking up as opposed to down. That's a positive thing to see. And obviously that little branch of 3 games at home, they've already won 2. They'll want to win that third one, maintain that unbeaten run, and put a bit of pressure on their opposition, like say Christopher and Livingston, because if they can keep that momentum going, the other teams have to try and keep pace, and they can hopefully get a bit of breathing room in that league.
Well, no game for Hawick Lundin in East 2, but in East 3, a derby between Earlston and Hawick Harlequins. We haven't been able, unfortunately, to get anything from Earlston this week, but earlier I spoke with Hawick Quins' Ali Presswell.
The last time we played them in the bowl, it was quite a heated contest.
But you got the win, of course, and you also have won your other match in East League 3, so you're actually 2 out of 2 at the moment.
Yeah, we are, yeah. It's a small squad we've got, but at least we're keeping consistency every week, which is a good thing.
Your aims for the season, presumably, is to get out of East League 3 and into East League 2.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, that's a big aim. And also going far in the bowl competition.
Because that's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because I think you take on Gala YM in the semi-final soon, don't you?
Yeah, we do, yeah. It's at Hawick, which is a good thing for us.
And any Gala Hawick game is always well worth taking part in.
Oh, yeah, it is, aye.
Do you fancy your chances? Gala YM obviously have had a couple of big wins this season as well.
I think at home we might have a good chance. It depends on how squad we have.
It's quite a fragmented league, isn't it, with various postponements so far, but Quins unbeaten in their one game so far. And also in East League 3, Gala YM take on Edinburgh Northern. Here's player coach Stuart Walker.
Saturday's a massive day for us at the YM for a few reasons. We're obviously looking to build on our last win against Liberton in the bowl. Didn't play last weekend, but we're looking to really build against Edinburgh Northern on Saturday, who are always tough, and they've had a good start to the season with a couple of wins, so it'll be a tough game. It's our ladies' day, so socially we're really looking to have a big day at the club off the pitch, which is something we've been trying to build for a while now, so we're all really excited about that. But first and foremost, massive game against Edinburgh Northern. We've got a pretty similar squad to what we had against Liberton, and there was a lot of really good aspects to that game. So we're really going to try and build on that and get the league campaign back on track.
Well, finally, a look at Kelso ladies, who won their match last Sunday against Kirstrophen Seconds. So that's 2 from 2 for them. They're away to Lismore. Let's hear from Kelso captain Donna Borthwick.
Both of us are really similar teams. We've won 2 and they've also won 2, so it'll be a really good match and we're really looking forward to it. We have played them before in the past, so we kind of know what they've got to offer, so we're really looking forward to going up there and bringing home the win again and making it 3 from 3.
Girls going well at the moment?
Yeah, 2 from 2. Again, like any league, it doesn't matter, male or female league, junior league or whatever. If you get off to a good start in your league, it helps build confidence, build a bit of momentum. But obviously, their opposition is in exactly the same boat, so it'll be a good leveler to see where they're at in terms of this league, being able to see where they can kind of aim for and look towards. So obviously, they'll be looking to try and maintain that unbeaten record, but it's going to be a difficult afternoon. But I'm sure the ladies can get the win.
We certainly wish them luck. That's it for today. My thanks to Dale Clancy. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our Borders Rugby special programme from Scremerston on Borders Rugby Radio with live commentary of Berwick against Peebles and score updates throughout the afternoon. And of course, we'll be back again next week for the Friday Rugby preview. And let's throw forward to the Saturday game after that, which will be Gala against Kelso. I cannot wait. But for now, from Dale and me, bye for now.